Hello and welcome to Empires of Today. I am your host, Rafa Arriasa. We have our four topics stacked up, starting with a update on the Iran deal, followed by the GOP reaction in Congress having to do with that deal. After that, we'll talk a little bit about a review of NATO and the US forces in Europe, which is announced to occur. And finally, is Finland set to become a nuclear power? Let's go ahead and start the clock on Iran. So the deal was formally signed on Wednesday by Donald Trump in the Palace of Versailles. This means that the formal signing that was planned on Friday was actually canceled. A lot of speculation having to do with that, but it looks like it was canceled mainly by the Iranians because of the continued fighting that's going on in Lebanon. Israel and Hezbollah are still going at it, although there is a truce that was announced today. Now, it is clear within the agreement that the conflict in Lebanon is included, according to the Iranians, that this includes Hezbollah specifically, which the US and Israel both don't necessarily agree with that. They believe that Hezbollah is, and it technically is, separate from Lebanon and the Lebanese government. Now, the fact is that the blockade, the naval blockade, was lifted. In addition to that, it looks like the Strait of Hormuz is actually open. We have about 10 ships that have gone through, and we have well over 500 that are queued to actually pass through it without any tolls. That could be the only real win out of this whole thing, is that the Iranians have agreed to not pay tolls, but we'll see how long that lasts. So that gets us right into the GOP reaction. Senators in Congress, Republican senators in particular in Congress, are not very happy with this situation. This includes Thom Tillis. This includes Lindsey Graham. Really, the biggest names on the GOP side in the Senate are really unhappy with this. The fact is there isn't a lot to show that this is any different from what was occurring before. Their Iranians aren't even fully agreeing to not charge tolls after the 60-day memorandum is up. To me, this looks like it's a deal that's essentially a way to stall out a situation. Like I mentioned last time, this could be to kind of sway focus over to Cuba, bring down the price of gas, which has obviously significantly gone down, in order to, give a GOP boost for the midterms. When it comes down to it, clearly the initial expectations of this conflict, how it was going to go about, didn't really pan out. I believe that the Trump administration likely believed that the Iranian people would rise up against the government in this situation, pushing for a regime change, and that just didn't really happen. The Iranians have really just locked in, and we really don't know where this is going to go from here. Genuinely just going to have to wait and see. In addition to that, we've got Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, announcing that there will be a formal review of all U.S. forces, NATO forces in Europe, specifically because of essentially the lack of support shown by the NATO allies for this specific conflict in Iran. Now, this is really significant because at this point, it doesn't look like, unless the allied countries do really raise their GDP expenditure to 3.5% in terms of defense, it looks like the US is going to start looking elsewhere in terms of bringing its power back home, really advancing its military for US purposes specifically, as opposed to continuing protecting Europe. At this point, Europe really has to start paying attention. The fact is that they haven't been in a very powerful military position since the Second World War. They've consistently essentially deteriorated their own military capacities. I believe Germany essentially only has about a month worth of ammunition on their own, something like that. So considering that, they really are going to have to start considering some alternatives or starting to meet the demands of the US in terms of its position in NATO, and obviously being there and in support when there is a situation like the one in Iran. Not to digress too much, but something to take note is that Japan wasn't simply defeated because of the atomic weapons. It was defeated because after the atomic weapons were dropped, essentially they knew that the Russians were also ready to invade. Essentially, all of Europe was supporting the United States, and they really didn't have any friends left after the Nazi regime fell apart. This is why they decided to surrender. The fact that the Iranians felt like they had an out, they feel like they can always negotiate their way out of situations. That's clearly what they're doing. And Europe really got to start paying attention. Clearly, Finland does seem to be doing something about it. They actually lifted their ban on holding nuclear weapons and developing nuclear energy. Keep in mind that Finland has a border with Russia that extends over 830 miles. This is obviously being seen by the Kremlin, by Putin, as some sort of aggression by Finland, the fact that they are now willing to hold nuclear weapons. But at the same time, this is coming right off of the back of what I just explained, which is that the US is really considering its options in how necessary its military presence is in Europe. So Finland has voted, their parliament has voted to in the future potentially hold nuclear weapons. And of course, this is coming off of the back of the fact that Ukraine and Russia are still at war. Recently, Ukraine has actually hit positions, some oil fields within Moscow. There's a pretty wild video of an entire facility just having its top blown off by Ukrainian drones. And of course, there is still continued attacks by Russia. Recently, even they destroyed a very ancient, over 1,000-year-old cathedral in Kiev. Didn't destroy it, but definitely damaged it significantly. And so, considering that, other European countries are taking note, and really there is going to have to be a significant increase in them paying attention to their own defense, particularly while this conflict with Russia continues. Well, that's all we got for today. Please like and subscribe. I'll see you next time, and you have a wonderful weekend.